right when they are pulling you over. That way, as a police officer is coming up to your vehicle and you already know that they're going to stop you, you can have those items already there waiting for them. You can let your window down so the officer can see you. And if you have tents on your window and it's not raining or too cold outside, anything like that, let all of your windows down. That way, it ensures the officer of his own safety. That way, he can see inside the vehicle, and you know that he can see inside. So it takes that level of safety down for an officer. So have the information that you know they're going to ask for in arm's reach, and when they come up to the vehicle, it makes it more easy for officers to know that, okay, now my safety level is down a little bit lower, and at least that I have to worry about if it's not in your hand or in arm's reach, and now you have to reach over into the glove compartment or reach up under the seat or something like that to grab it. Officers don't want any kind of fast and erratic movement. So when we don't have to worry about that, at least that we have to worry about as far as being safe.
Okay. As you were answering that question, I thought about a scenario where, like, if I'm speeding, for example, I know good and well when the lights go off that's why I'm being stopped. But is it a different scenario if you've actually done nothing, or you haven't broken a law per se? You didn't run a light, you weren't speeding. Is there where you might be being profiled? Let's say that. Is there a different approach to that type of stop versus like a traffic stop, or it's the same
Well,
thing?
I mean, I have been stopped like that. I haven't done anything wrong, and I have been profiled. So, in bottom line is, if a police officer stops you and you know that you haven't done anything wrong, then still, go by what the officer says, because, like earlier when Pastor Cofield said, the 15-year-old was lied to. Officers sometimes they like that. They do stupid stuff. They do lie, and some officers take it above and beyond in stopping vehicles or stopping individuals just for the heck of it. They do it. But bottom line is, when you are stopping, you are detained, listen to what the officer says, answer all of their questions in a sense. But by that same token, it goes back to, like I said earlier, when they stop you, answer their questions, but look at that name and that badge number, because that way, if you feel as though you were stopped or if you've been treated unjust, you can always ask for a supervisor, or you can always file that complaint.
Uh, 2 minutes. Does any other panelists want to chime in on what they've heard? Is there a legal angle that we can think of for attorneys, pastor? Anything that you can add in 2 minutes to this question? This question that was asked.
Yeah, I would defer to the attorneys. I do think, though, it's important for us to distinguish between know your rights and getting home alive. Um,
Sure.
because we can know our rights and exercise our rights. And, officers have an omnipotence complex, and so when they tell you what to do, whether it's your right or not, let's take Sandra Bland, for example. When you watch that footage, I'm saying to myself, Sandra, just put the cigarette out and just do what the officer's saying. Now, does she have to put it out legally? No. There's nothing illegal about smoking a cigarette, right? But when I'm watching the footage, I'm saying, Sandra, man, just don't escalate this. Just put the cigarette out. You know what I mean? Just comply, because that fight is not a fight that you're gonna win out on the street. And I'll defer to the defense attorneys, and I know Monique has talked about this extensively, but I just think we need to make sure that we're talking about, and we understand that we're talking about different things when we have these conversations.
I was definitely thinking of Sandra Bland. That was somebody that knew her rights and talked about her rights. And like you said, it's not it's kind of how to get home. And to me, it also depends on the officer's subjective intent. If he's just planning on a traffic stop, then maybe those regular protocol things will work. But a lot of times, the officers in my cases, have a subjective intent when they're pulling you over already what the plan is. And so there's a lot of things, there's a lot of segues how they can get in your car. The first one is if the smell of marijuana. So with or without a search warrant, if they say they smell marijuana, they're going to get in your car. Officer safety is a way they can get in your car. So I like how people have the body cams now of their own. I think trying to be respectful and just trying to see where the officer is going and kind of trying to think ahead. It really just depends on what the officer's intent is. Because when he's pulling you over, it's sometimes it's just not for a traffic stop. So just trying to think ahead and kind of think on your feet in those situations.
Yeah, and I want to add to that because I think Monique is so on it. In the former life, I was a juvenile probation officer, and I can't tell you how many kids I got on probation whose charge was evading arrest. And I was looking for the other charge. Like, okay, what were they being arrested for? There was never another charge. It was just evading arrest. How can I evade arrest if you're not arresting me for something? Like, it doesn't make sense. So to the point, this 15-year-old young man who was drilled by his parents, you don't walk away from the officer until the officer releases you. So he literally stood there for a couple of minutes and they didn't say anything. And then they finally said, well, okay, you go ahead and make sure you don't get into trouble, you know. But it's like, it's a game that's played. And I think the intent of the officer is so much a part of it. It's not black and white. It's not the law. It's more than that. And I think we all need to be, I think we're all aware of it. I think we just need to say it publicly, right? It's not just, oh, that's not my right. I don't have to answer you, officer. You know, I don't know how many of you saw the footage of the young man who was sitting there. He didn't ask the officers to come into his home. He brought everybody there. They said it was exigent circumstances. Nobody hollered out, nobody screamed, but they forced their way into his home. He didn't ask them into the home. He didn't call the police, but they decided that they were coming in. Now, again, that's a fight that he can fight later on, but we need to be aware that all of those kinds of subjective things come into play.
Now, one thing, Pastor Cofield, to that regard, is that when we have to call the district attorney and let them know what charges we have, they're always going to take the higher offense than the lower offense. So when you get that evading arrest, which has been a felony for years, and if they wanted to stop them, let's say for littering, which is a Class C offense, but they evaded and ran from us, when we call the district attorney and tell them what happened, they're going to say, okay, we'll take the evading because it's a higher offense. And that's probably why you didn't see the lower offense in there. Sometimes in the charges, officers are supposed to put the second offense in there, but it's not required that we have to. But if you're doing it the right way, you would put that in there. So that's probably why you don't see that part in the reports and something like that when you're looking for the officer that's filing the charges.
Webb, you know I love you, brother, but I've never, listen, police officers, I don't understand how they have a higher sense of smell. They can smell marijuana in a car going by 60 miles an hour and they standing still. I mean, that's all, that always is done. And that evading arrest deal, sometimes officers are just pissed that a kid ran away from them. And so
that's true. It's a part of, I mean, you got to look at the ability that we have to make an arrest or to detain people. It's a thin line. And like you said, you know, I smell marijuana a quarter mile. That's what I put in my report. That's what I'm saying. That's the reason why I stop y'all. Sometimes, you know, officers do it just for GP.
Yeah, no, I got you. But when don't get mad at me because I can run faster than you. and then when you catch me, 5 of y'all catch me, y'all whip my ass, and then go call the DA talking about it was evading arrest. Come on now.
We had all day. We could really knock this out and get into it. But no, let's keep the conversation going. So now, Officer Webb, it's, man, you should have had your friend Officer Brown with you so we could not have you have to answer all these questions.
Hey,
but it's gonna start.
I do not mind. It's all good.
Fantastic.
I'm on. Officer Brown is on. I'm on. Y'all can ask me whatever.
Hey, Officer Brown, how are you?
No, I'm well.
since you finally got on, can I give you 1 minute to introduce yourself, and then I'm going to go into the next question.
Absolutely. I'm Officer Brown. I work out of South Central with Officer Webb. We partner up on a lot of things. I'm over the Explorers program, and with the Explorers program, it's kids who are seeking a career in law enforcement. And so they come to the station on Tuesdays. Well, prior to all the pandemic stuff, they come to the station on Tuesdays, and I give them I teach them different scenarios on how to deal with the police. And then they go through the scenarios, and we go to competitions, and they compete with teams all across the state of Texas. And we've won a lot, and just dealing with, being the police, basically. Okay, so let's switch that over. I also do the TAPS program along with Officer Webb. We go into Jack Yates. We get with the counselors and the wraparound specialists, and we figure out who are the most at-risk youth that's within that school. And so it's not just at Yates, it's at several schools. We're adding more elementary and middle schools now, but our particular baby is Jack Yates. And so we get the most at-risk youth, and then we teach them how to interact with the police. We teach them different ways of how to complete a traffic stop. We go over drinking and driving. We even bring out golf carts and set up a whole course, give them goggles to show them what it's like to drive with marijuana, LSD, whatever it is, alcohol. We normally do that around prom time because we know that's when a lot of our fatalities happen with our teens. So we cover all kind of different situations. We basically become their mentors, their positive mentors, to let them know that you can interact with the police in a positive manner, because we know within the neighborhood that we're in and that we're servicing, a lot of them, the only dealings that they have with us are negative. It's their parents calling, that we're going to their house, maybe taking a parent or somebody to jail, or something of that nature. So we want them to know that we do have positive interactions with them, and that they can come to us, and we are there for them. So we not only go into the school, we deal with them outside of the school as well, because we build those relationships with them.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us today and helping enlighten the conversation, because we want to come out with some actionable items from this whole conversation, rather than just hearing ourselves talk some more. So college, I went to Prairie View, right? And it is not uncommon to have a car full of young Black guys in there, right? We get pulled over by the law. What do we need to do?
As a passenger.
The passengers, that is.
Okay, so your main thing you want to do is make sure all of those windows are down.
Uh-oh, you're muted.
You just muted yourself.
Officer, look, all my windows are down except that don't go down. We're fully transparent or whatever. I have other people in the back seat if they can't see in the back seat. It just lessens the heightened, because every traffic stop is heightened for any officer, regardless of who it is. And I grew up in Third Ward, but anytime I pull over a vehicle, I don't care where I'm at. I don't care if I'm in Third Ward. I don't care if I'm in the medical center, River, cover all of that area. It's a heightened situation, because I need for you all to understand that you all know what you're going to do in that car. I don't know. I just know what I'm walking into blindly, So it does lessen when you telling the officer, okay, look, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to keep my hands up. Everybody's hands are, visible to you. And we have no issue, basically. So just kind of lessen that heightened system insecurity coming to a vehicle. That's the best thing to do. Just be transparent with the officer.
Officer Brown, to you, passenger in the car.
Webb.
Did I say Brown? I meant Webb. Officer Webb, passenger in the car. What do I need to do? I'm riding with my boy. What do I need to do?
Like Officer Brown said, at all times, for our own safety, we want to make sure that we can see your hands, no matter what it is. And outside of listening to the officer's instructions, no sudden movement, And of course, a lot of times when you have that one in the vehicle that always wants to speak out and always wants to let his voice be heard, that's the one that's going to bring all attention from the officer, from whoever, to you. So just listen to what the officer's saying and don't make any kind of quick and sudden movements, and just go with the way the traffic stop or the detaining is being done, and just answer all questions, and that makes everything cool and calm for everybody.
So Attorney Cohen or Attorney Payne? I'll go with Attorney Cohen first because he hadn't answered anything at this point yet. Isn't it my right as a passenger to say something even though it might set off the police officer? I know, Pastor Cofield, we want to get home, but I'm saying, isn't this my right as a citizen to be able to speak to the officer outside of following instructions?
Yes, you're right, but I would suggest as a passenger that you not say anything under the circumstances. So in the context of defense attorneys, we're always going to err on the side of saying exercise your right to remain silent. So I guess the question for me would be, what would be the basis of a passenger having something to say, first of all? Because technically the officer, the only thing the officer should be having any conversation with the passenger about, let's say on a regular traffic stop, would be possibly just to identify themselves, which they don't even have to do that. So you know, my suggestion, advice to a passenger would be just to have nothing to say, you know, under those circumstances.
Awesome.
And I want to add just to that, just to give you an example. So you trying to have a conversation with an officer and you're going to give them a reason for your speeding as if they're going to change their mind and giving you that ticket. And you just gave them evidence and ammunition that's going to come up in court when you show up for your ticket and be like, oh yeah, Mr. Cohen told me that his son was ill at the hospital. He was rushing and blah, 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 blah. Cause that's what you told the officer, thinking that you're going to get this human response. And all of a sudden they're going to be like, well, you know what? That's cool. I'm going to give you a warning. That may happen. It may not happen. But to Attorney Cohen's point, man, just keep your mouth shut.
Yeah. Point taken. So I'm going to shut up and let my wife take the next question.
In light of Attorney Cohen's response, when you are stopped by law enforcement, is it a requirement that they let you know why you're being stopped? And is it appropriate to ask any questions around the reason for that stop? And at what point would it be okay to do that in light of Attorney Cohen's statement of, you know, kind of not saying too much? Because the goal is to get home safely.
So that
Go
all goes.
Go ahead, Brown. Yeah, get that one, Brown.
Okay, so that all goes back to training. With HPD, I can speak for. I can't speak for any other agency because I don't know how they're trained. With our training, we are trained to tell you who we are, what department we're working for, and why we pulled you over. And then we'll go on with all the other small talk or whatever it is. So we are trained to tell you why we're stopping you. It could be across the board. Most officers that I've spoken with, just in like, you know, cross training with other officers, they are taught the same thing. So anyone that deviates from that, I mean, it's kind of one of those things like you learn stuff a certain way and then you kind of find your own way through it. You find your own way of going about it, but you still stay on that course. But yes, you can definitely ask them, why did you pull me over if you missed it in their spiel, and you know, and ask whatever questions you want, because it is freedom of speech. You can ask whatever it is you want, but as the attorney said, don't say too much. Don't say too much, because now you're giving them stuff, and then what's the point of just going on and want to argue back and forth and all of this stuff? Most officers really want to give you a warning because they don't want to go through all that, either the handwriting, You know how much stuff on that ticket you got to write out? And then if I'm giving you multiple, because that's what really gets officers. When you pull them over and then they want to talk and tell you, well, I know this and now I'm about to write you for everything when I was going to write you for this one thing and let you go. Since you so inconvenient, we're going to make you more inconvenient. You see what I'm saying? Like, so all of that neck snapping and talking and out doing, it's not worth it. Just take your ticket or take your warning, because most of them gonna give you a warning, especially these days, and just be like, okay, officer, and go about your business. Because that's what we tell, the kids. Like, you're not gonna hold court in the street. It's not worth it. It wastes your time and our time, because it is other calls that we can be taken care of. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, ma'am. Officer Webb.
Let me add to that. For those that don't know, we do not have a quota.
No. Thank you for that.
We do not have a quota. Everybody think that you're trying to fulfill your quota. We don't have that. But to touch on that, I mean, stop, answer their questions, leave it at that, and then we roll from there. That's the main thing, because you will run across some officers that have that whatever syndrome they have. Little man, mad at the wife syndrome, slept on the wrong side of the bed, slept on the couch. So you never know what the officer is going through that day. But like officers, we try to teach and try to tell, citizens, we want that traffic stop to be over as quick as possible. So the less you say, the less you do, the quicker it can be over. And then you can go from there, period. So that's some of the things that we pass on.
And Webb, let's be clear. You said HPD doesn't have quotas.
Nobody has. It's against the law. It's against the law.
Yes.
Yeah, you have
okay,
certain,
y'all. Okay.
You have certain requirements that they might want you to do if you are in a certain unit, but it's against the law to have a quota to go out and tell Officer Webb, you have to go out and write 30 tickets today. We can't say that to any law enforcement officer.
Well, wait a minute. What'd you say? You have certain requirements?
They have requirements to be in a certain unit.
Oh.
To be in a certain unit, if I have 5 officers in my unit, I'm writing 30, and this last person is only writing 10. When the supervisor get ready to go and turn his paperwork in, he's gonna be like, hey, you're not holding your weight. If you want to stay in our unit, you might want to do like the other officers and go ahead and step your game up. But legally, they can't make you do it. But that's just a part of a unknown, unwritten requirement to be in certain units.
Sound like a rose by another name.
Yeah.
I
think Minister Bell said that's a quota, Officer Brown. Yeah, that's what he put in the comment. That's a quota, Officer Brown.
That's the deal. That's the deal. But you made a statement, and I'm going slightly off script here, but the statement that you made was whatever complex the officer is going through at that particular point in time. So why isn't that same grace or that same humanity offered to the citizen who is probably going through something at that time? Because come on now, we already know that as much as a traffic stop is an intense moment for the police officer, because you all go by, this could be your last one. At the same time, the citizen is also heightened anxiety as well, because what is this police officer going to do?
And I don't have a gun.
And we aren't armed, not all of us, but at that point, the humanity that we're talking about in that I'm having a day, like Sandra Bland was having a day, and what's my boy in Maryland who was having a day, Freddie Gray. How do we have that human exchange in the process of this legal thing that we have to do of dealing with the law and making sure that our humanities are still maintained and not be this hegemonic power structure of I'm the law, you're the citizen, you need to do what I say, I don't care what day you're having, I'm having a bad day and I got the badge. How do we fix that to where we can actually see a human doing his job and us as citizens following through on you getting your job done.
Conversations. That's the only way that that's going to happen, because I absolutely agree with you on that same humanity being extended to the citizen, because we are human, and we know just as we can have a bad day, our citizens can have a bad day. And sometimes, sometimes that's why we understand that, they want to express, well, I'm trying to get here, or I'm trying to get that. Okay, well then sometimes it's good to express those things where you're trying to get while you were speeding, because I can extend that courtesy to you. Maybe you was in emergency going to the hospital. Now I can provide you an escort versus giving you a citation. But if those conversations have to be had, and sometimes they're uncomfortable conversations on both sides, but it's okay, because that's the only way things are going to be fixed, if we have those conversations. Every station within the city of Houston, even on our outskirts, the ones that we back up to, like Montgomery, Galveston, Fort Bend, we all have a PIP meeting. And unfortunately, the people do not go to the PIP meetings. I am one of the runners. It's a positive interaction program. And with the PIP meeting, every PIP meeting, we have one a month. We pick a topic, we give the date, the time, everything, what the topic's going to be, and who the speaker is going to be. And we have these conversations, and these conversations are so important to have. We just converse all around the room, and unfortunately, it's the same people who show up to these PIP meetings. So I encourage everybody that's on this Zoom to find out, well, right now, everything's virtual, so they're just doing one citywide PIP meeting, via YouTube. But once everything is over, I encourage everyone to find out from their police station when is their PIP meeting. Even I believe Fort Bend and Harris County may also do PIP meetings as well. But those conversations, that's the time when you have them. And it's so, so, so important.
Attorneys, either one, do y'all have anything to add?
I would like to add, I think we have two great officers on the panel, but it's almost like we're having a conversation with the choir, right? That's like true. These are two Black officers, right? True. One of them said they're from South Park, right? That are from the community. So we're going to get a different answer from these officers. I wish these were the officers that stopped my clients every day. That's not what I'm dealing with.
I'm calling for Officer Brown anytime I get stopped.
Oh yeah, I'm like, hey,
Officer Brown.
Officer Brown. I'm saying, and that's kind of one of my rubs with HPD. Yes. We have two sides. I mean, we even saw it at the protest. We have the Art Acevedo that's on TV, and then I represented 92, me and a group of lawyers of the protesters that were beat, tased, and sponge bullet at night. So we have two of the seems like the best officers represented in this call, but that's not really what you're interacting with on the streets. And so I don't know how we get more Officer Browns and the other officer in HPD, but that's not really what we're dealing with.
That's what we're working towards.
I'm just being
That's what we're working towards, getting more Officer Browns and Officer Webbs in HPD. I will say, unfortunately, so many of our officers were hurt by thrown bottles, and that's what deployed those rubber bullets and tear gas, but not everyone sees that. So if I'm getting busted in the face, I'm ducking, and Officer Webb and I were out there at that time, so this was firsthand knowledge and things that we saw, even though we work in the community. At the end of the day, when it's something so big like that, we do have to, we're still police officers, we still have to get in there and get in the brunt of things. And so unfortunately, those nights, we're ducking, for our lives, make sure we don't get hit in the head. One of my really good friends who works out of our station, had glass in his eyes and fractured bones in his face from being hit with bottles and rocks and all kind of things. And so that's the things that we're trying to get away from. We are so pro protesting We love it. I love to see it. We even get out there and we go with them. Like, that's what we do.
I love it.
But at the same token, we got to protect ourselves too, because we're not going to just stand there and get hit in the face with bottles and get hit in the face with bricks and allow them, because if we just allow people to do what they want to do, we're going to end up like they were in Chicago and Minneapolis, and nobody wants to see their communities go down like that. No. We want to make sure that everyone has everything that they need, but that's where we come in to educate those, to let them know it's a right way to do everything. And we understand that it takes action in order for people to start listening. So we are all for your protest and everything, but I'm gonna come home to my babies every day. And, and I just feel like, okay, it's unfair to me, the person that maybe be the one that's out here, making sure your family got food and making sure that your kids know how to deal with certain issues with the police and making sure we have those positive interactions. And then now we did a great job in protesting, taking care of business during the daytime, but soon as nightfall, we getting bottles and stuff thrown at us. Like, that's not fair to us. You know what I mean? So yes, it was responded to as such, unfortunately, but it's something that happens. It happens. And we just, like I said, we want to encourage the protesting, but in the right way.
I'll say we don't want to protest, because protest means that there's something that's systematically wrong, and we would not rather that. So Attorney Cohen, I see you. I'm ready for you.
Yes, sir. So just to go to your question about the humanity issue of police officers, I think one of the greatest things or best things that happen, and I don't want to use that term so much as a defense attorney in terms of saying greatest things, but one of the best things that happened in the George Floyd situation was for the officer and the officers to have been arrested and put on a bond. So I think one of the problems that we've seen over the years in a lot of these police brutality situations is that the police officers haven't been held to the same standard of probable cause in their determination as to whether a crime took place, and then as to whether they would have to be arrested and put on a bond. And so I think what that did, that set a standard to say, okay, we're going to deal, just if any one of us as non-police officers would have sat on somebody's neck for 10 minutes, it wouldn't have been a doubt. We would have been arrested right there on the scene. I understand there's a benefit of the doubt that police officers get in those situations because they are in a position to uphold the law under those circumstances. But I think it was fairly obvious, within 10 or 15 minutes, whoever watched that video, that he had gone well beyond the standard of protecting and serving, and had moved into the arena of having committed a crime. So that question of probable cause to arrest Derek Chauvin was pretty easy, and I think you set the tone when you say, okay, we'll look at this through the lens of, yes, it is a police officer, but those same standards of determining did he commit a crime? Should he be arrested? What should the bond be? And I think what that does, it causes police officers to have to think too, now, I can't just go do what I want to do in terms of using the cover of this person is a suspect, because obviously when a person is a suspect, we believe that they should have less rights than anyone else for whatever reason. But they have a right to life. So I think that humanity standpoint comes in there from the perspective of, okay, now we got to think about, as police officers, how we deal with suspects in the context of not using what we call excessive force under the circumstances.
Thank you for that. Let's keep it going.
Yeah, let's keep it going. I wanted to acknowledge there's a lot of chat going on in the chat box. I want to get to all of that, but I also want to get through the questions that we have. So thank you, and keep posting there. And when time, at the end of our questioning, we'll go to the chat box. And I appreciate the attorneys and officers responding in the chat box as well to some of the questions that have been posted. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So the next question, if I feel uncomfortable during a stop, am I legally allowed to request that another officer or station chief be called to the scene? And before you answer, I remember, I don't know who told me, but I remember like if you see sirens in the back and you're in a dark area, you can drive to a well-lit gas station or some other area before you actually stop your car. So I'll add that in there, but then if you could answer that question about asking for another officer to be brought to the scene if you feel uncomfortable for any reason.
Absolutely. You are well in your right to ask for a supervisor to make that scene. You can even ask them, did you turn your camera on? Because with HPD, we have to turn our camera on, steering wheel to steering wheel.
It's a light when the camera is on.
You'll have a green and a red light on. Green and red will be on when it's recording. And you can definitely ask that officer, did you turn your camera on? And can I get a supervisor? They have to give you a supervisor, and they have to call out on every traffic stop. And so the dispatcher knows exactly where they are. You are very well in your right to drive to a better lit area. Just when that officer approached you, let them know it was way too dark back there. I needed to get to a lit area to feel, safe for me. And because you do have that right. You do have that right because you want to feel safe, and we want you to feel safe because the safer you feel, it makes us feel safe as well.
Sure.
Officer Webb, I'll let you get in before I ask a follow-up.
Well, just to touch on what she said also, asking for that, there's a difference in asking for another officer or asking for a supervisor. You can ask for another officer all you want to, but that won't do you any good. But you can ask for a supervisor because you feel as though you are not being treated fairly. And like she said, by our general orders, a supervisor has to come out. But that doesn't mean anything is going to change, but you can still ask for it, because I've had a situation like that where a white citizen was mad that I pulled her over. Of course, it was years ago now, back in my days. And she was mad, and she asked for a supervisor. So I called out a supervisor, and I've told her he was going to say the same thing that I said. So fast forward, supervisor came out. It was a white supervisor, and you could just see when he came out there, and you could see, I stood off to the side, and they went over and talked. And if you could just see what was going through my mind when he told her the same thing I did, and then her face just turned bloodshot red, and she looked over at me, and I'm laughing. I'm just got a quick little smile on my face. And then after it was all over, said and done, he came back over and talked to me, and then I told him what happened and everything got situated. But she ended up still getting a ticket, and she didn't like it. And of course, I did go to court, and she was found guilty. But I just wanted y'all to know there's a difference between asking for a supervisor and another officer. Go ahead.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you for that. I know that in a lot of instances, or let me not say I know, but I would imagine that in a lot of instances, there's a little bit of an ego bruise with, hey, I'm the law and you're telling me that I'm not enough at this particular point in time. You all are the good cops. And so in this story that we just heard from you, Officer Webb, you basically said you were doing the right thing and playing by all the rules. Now, what about the reverse of that? What about the flip side of that, when the officer is actually not doing that and they're actually in more of an intimidation mode than they're actually in a legal protecting and serving mode, and then the citizen does that and creates frustration? We're waiting on that to happen. What do we do?
Well, it goes back to, like I said, of course, when the officer stops you, he has the upper hand. And in a sense, it goes back to the first thing I said. Cooperate, look at his name and badge number, and if you feel as though you were unjustly treated, then you can file that complaint, or you can call the supervisor and let the supervisor know that you want to file a complaint. But bottom line comes is, don't get into that going back and forth with the officer. Record their name mentally, and then you can go from there as far as filing a complaint and filing on it.
And the biggest thing about that is filing that complaint, because you can call a supervisor out there, and trust me, these supervisors know they're problem officers. So you may not be the first one to say, oh, they did this. And we're creature of habits. So if I treat you one way on a traffic stop, I'm bound to treat somebody else, maybe the next 4 or 5, you know, before I do it again, but I'm bound to treat somebody else that same way. And so those supervisors are not going to lose their job and be demoted for another officer. So they're going to do their job. That's one thing I can say. One thing
I can say too, I've been there like 28 years, and we've had quite a few chiefs. Acevedo, he don't play.
Cutthroat.
He do not play. He has came in, and I met him before he was the police chief, but he's came in and changed up and implemented so many things. He's made all supervisors be more accountable for everything that they do. So he do not play in a sense to where he has each and every last supervisor making sure each and every last officer that is under them be accountable for everything that they do.
Thank you. So attorneys, is there any legal precedent? Because here's one of the things now, we're looking at the idea of making it home, right? But it may happen that we don't make it home, and the citizen feels as though they have been mistreated and they got detained and it was not worth it. Are there any legal precedents that we have where the citizen has won? Because this can also empower the citizen to know that the law will actually come through and justice will actually be served on their behalf. Is there any precedents or anything that we can depend on legally to support us if we end up in the negative side of that situation? Not dead, but actually detained, because we can't do nothing if we dead.
I think, and we've talked about the complaint process, I think actually filing a complaint is helpful. The problem is it's self-regulated. And so if it's not a sustained complaint, it does not go into their file, which is something that we're working on. And they have a citizens review board, but it's some flaws in that as well. But I think actually just making those complaints is a start. Like I said, we're working on the process of how they're reviewed, but at least it is notated in some sort of way. So if that officer continues to do those things, I believe the officer in George Floyd, they said he had 18 complaints. So having that documented in his past is really important.
All right. I have enough.
And I totally agree in terms of the complaint process. And as Monique pointed out, it definitely needs to be worked on because most of it is just internal review. And so you're in a situation where, the police are policing the police in those contexts. I think, obviously another aspect to it, because I think that goes a little bit, I guess it goes to situations where people may not have actually been charged with anything. Sometimes it's better where a person has been charged with something because then they have those protections within the system where those issues can come up. Say, for example, if you're illegally searched and seized, and under the context of being illegally searched and seized, you can raise that as a violation of the Fourth Amendment to get evidence suppressed. And then those matters, for whatever reason, seem to come to greater light in those situations where a person has actually been charged with a crime. But yeah, to the point where if I'm stopped and let's say I'm illegally searched and they don't find anything, a lot of times those are the situations that are more difficult to get redress out of. But definitely it does need to be documented through complaint.
Okay.
Along with that complaint process that you were talking about, is it I don't know if legal's the word, but would you advise a citizen to have video footage or audio footage of whatever's going on? Because absent of that footage, a lot more things would have, been never brought to light, basically. And, I've seen videos where people are videoing cops and they're like discouraging that recording.
Why you got a camera on?
Yeah. So legally, what are we allowed to do as citizens when it comes to recording a traffic stop, being profiled, whatever the situation is?
Well,
You can record it, officer.
Yeah,
you can record. There's nothing against that.
Yeah,
you
There's
can.
nothing against that at all. But I even tell citizens and what I've seen, now in this day and time, you see more and more people pulling that phone and that camera out. There's nothing against that. In the past, when they've done it, you've always seen or heard of an officer saying, "Get that down, get that down."
Right.
But nationwide and across the board, you can see where officers and departments are getting educated and trained themselves. And I know we definitely do it to know that you cannot stop and tell a citizen to put that phone down and stop recording at any point in time.
Okay.
Because just as we're recording, they have that very same right to record from the time we get out our car to the time we get back in our vehicles to leave.
Right.
And however long they want to record after that, you absolutely are within your right to record. And we encourage it. We really do. We encourage it, especially the department, because if you do have that video, it makes their job, the internal affairs supervisors, it makes their job a lot easier in closing that case and saying, okay, yeah, we need to give this officer days off or whatever the case may be. Trust me, we get punished for everything, okay? Everything. So please don't think that HPD trying to hide nothing. I had 2 days off for posting on social media. So
Attorney Cohen, you were gonna say something. I saw you start you were gonna say something.
Well, yeah, no, I was just gonna agree that citizens do have the right to record. I guess the line in the sand would be where it can be asserted or alleged by the officer that they may be obstructing an arrest. So I would just, say to people, if you are going to record, make sure you're not in any way involving yourself in the arrest process or the detention process.
Especially when an officer asks you to step back and you don't, that's already a red flag right there. Step back 3 feet. Okay, whatever, 3 feet might be different to you and me. Just step back. If he actually step back again, step back. But he cannot tell you, put that phone down, stop recording. Even if they are talking to you about an investigation that you have, you can hold that phone in one hand while you're talking to him, and he still can't make you put the phone down.
What happens if you ask an officer, because Officer Brown, you told us that we can't ask that an officer's body cam be turned on if they refuse to turn it on?
Their body camera should be on. That's days off. If you get out of that vehicle and your body camera is not on, and you get back in that vehicle and your body camera is not on, simple as that, that's days off. Because if you do have a late activation, because it happens, we haven't always had cameras. And so it even happened to me. I'm like, oh, shoot, I forgot to turn on my camera. I better be on that radio, advising dispatch and asking for a supervisor to let them know I had a late activation. After that scene is over, I need to put a memo in my slip. If a report is written, I need to put an explanation in my report. If not, once that video is reviewed, guarantee I will be in internal affairs answering questions.
Kind of to Monique Sparks Payne comment about, we've got the best officers on the call. So
I wanted to say something about that.
What if they don't? What if they're like, no, I'm not doing that. I don't got to do, start rolling their necks or whatever.
That's when you ask for that supervisor. And believe it or not, people have called the police on the police, okay? So if you got a call while they standing right there, and let them know, look, I'm on this traffic stop. I got officer so-and-so in front of me. I need a supervisor, and they won't call me one. Trust me, a supervisor gonna be there faster than you can probably turn around and see if they coming.
Can we call
911 for that? No, you can't call 911 for that.
Remember the DD number.
Put it in your phone.
one thing you have to realize is this is me and Officer Brown and I are telling y'all how HPD operates. But in our city, we have so many other departments that intertwine with each other at different times. We don't know what their rules and regulations and general orders are. We know ours, so we can tell you that, but we can't say the same thing for them. If how much trouble they would get into if they body cameras stay on all day, if they have to turn it on, or what happened if they don't. So we're telling everyone about ours so it can still have input and going forward when you have to deal with HPD. But the main thing is look at that patch or that vehicle, and it's a whole different set of guidelines if it's Harris County or Metro or one of the constables.
One thing I wanted to say about the body cams is that right now there's a 6-month delay in even getting a body cam, right? And they won't escalate the request of a body cam. So you think, hey, I got arrested, I got this on body cam, this is gonna be cleared up as soon as I get to court. No, you may have to go to court 6 months, 8 months before you even get the body cam. And so that's a whole nother issue that we're not discussing, is even when we get the body cam, and then when we get the body cam, at that point we can address gaps. But it takes so long to get the body cam. You had, look at all what has happened during that time.
All right. So one more well, I can't promise you how many more off-script questions I got. I got a lot of them. I learned from Pastor Cofield. So anyway, I saw a video on social media that said, and it was not people of our skin color. They said, I don't answer questions. In essence, invoking the Fifth Amendment right when they're with police officers. And so he said, as a citizen, it's your right to say, I don't answer questions, and you should record the interaction with the police officer. Is that valid? Number one, I saw Attorney Sparks shake her head, but the second question
is it okay for Black people to do?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Is it okay with me as a Black man
in the video
telling you I don't answer questions? Black. I am pleading the Fifth, and I am not going to perjure or incriminate myself.
I'm going to say that about a lot of the things y'all asked about driving away till you get to a lighted area. Is that okay for a Black person to do? Because if you keep driving away from an officer, that may not work out as well.
Yeah.
So it really just depends on who you are and what you're doing. I agree with you that you should not make statements, but again, it goes to the officer's subjective intent and what his plan is. And if his plan is not for this just to be a quick traffic stop, that may not work out well for you. But I agree, the less you say, the better it's going to help you in court.
Yeah, as officers, if we have a reason to stop you, of course, we are conducting an investigation. Yes, you have to answer our questions, but if we don't have a reason, like you've seen some of those people say, and they don't have a reason for stopping them, then they don't have to answer any kind of question. They'll say it. You don't have a right to question me. I'm not answering any questions. Okay, then we'll just say, have a nice day and turn around. Now, to go on a little bit more about the traffic stop part, if you're not in a well-lit area, what we forgot to mention was that what we tell a lot of people, and we pass it on, to let the officer know that you see them and you acknowledge the fact that they're behind you and it's a dark road. Turn your hazard lights on, let your window down, and kind of wave your hand and let them know that I see you, and slow down, and then get to a spot that's well lit as compared to still driving 50, 60 miles an hour. Then the officer's going to get on the radio. It's like the car is not stopping. I have a car failing to stop. And that's going to make matters worse. So turn your hazard lights on, slow down. And if you can, like I said, let your window down and put your hand out the window so the officer will know that you do see them and you are slowing down. And most officers understand that part of it. And they'll look at, okay, they're trying to get into that lit area.
Thank you for clarifying that, because I didn't mention that, but that is a very important piece to communicate, basically, that you do see them and you're just going to go somewhere else to complete the stop. So thank you for that, Officer Webb.
I think Pastor Kofi would love to hear the answer to this question. Can you share what training officers are getting in de-escalation?
Well, we have T-close certified hours that we have to take yearly. Every officer, whether you are working inside in one of the specialized divisions or out on patrol, but we have classes that we have to take yearly that involves officers dealing with de-escalating situations and crisis situations also. So we have to take them yearly. So those are some of the things that we do in those situations, those incidents.
In your de-escalation training, is there awareness around citizens that may have mental capacities that keep them from responding? For example, an autistic child or adult that is nonverbal. Do y'all have awareness of what that looks like and then how to approach that situation? Because there was a guy in, I think it was Georgia, and they arrested him, but he was nonverbal, so he couldn't respond to Charlotte. He wasn't able to respond. And if you are aware of what an autistic person looks like and how they behave, that should not have happened. So my question again, are y'all in your de-escalation training made aware of situations where people are either mentally or physically unable to cooperate and comply with the officer?
Absolutely, we do have those trainings. So the de-escalation training that he was speaking of, that's actually touched in that class. It's also touched in another class that we have dealing with mental illness. So when they call it a mental illness class, but it's not just all, mentally ill, it's autistic, is included in that as well. And we actually physically do exercises to show how you would interact with this person. How would you deal with this person if this is happening, if this is going on, they're dealing with this, situation, medical situation that they're having. How would you address that? Because you may get the call as one thing because the citizens around them don't know. And then, so the biggest thing in our training is to arrive and assess the situation before you just go run in. Because when you just run in, you may react any kind of way, thinking that it's the same situation you've dealt with before. And every situation is not the same. So yes, we actually do training based on, dealing with the autistic and nonverbal and all of those things. And we actually do hands-on productions with that.
Pastor, I see you itching.
I'm really struggling, to be honest with you, because I think Brown and Webb are giving us great answers, and I think they're great officers. We had hearing impaired people who were arrested during the protests for failure to comply with verbal commands. I mean, the fact is, officers, by and large, they assume the worst. When a black man has his knee on your neck and he's telling you he can't breathe, you go to ASA 9, ASA 10, and ASA 11 when you tell them, well, you talking, stop talking, because if you can talk, you can breathe. So it's those assumptions that we're lying. It's assumptions that black men are always guilty, whether they are the plaintiff or the defendant. They are always guilty and have to be proven innocent. And that's how policing, by and large, listen, there's a reason why Brown and Webb are in the positions that they're in, because they're not going to be the officers in the vehicle like the two white guys approaching a 15-year-old asking him what's he doing, and he's sitting there walking a damn dog. Like they're not even going to do that. They're not going to ask kids walking home from school to empty their backpacks because they look like they could be drug dealers. Like they're not going to do that, And so I appreciate, what they're saying, but the T-close training is a joke. For years, and I'm talking about up until recently, police officers, unions, and chiefs wouldn't even admit that police officers had implicit bias. I mean, they wouldn't even admit it. So, what we're talking about now and the stuff that's still going on, I love the ideal, but there's, to Webb and Brown's credit, there's a level of cultural sensitivity that they don't need to have, that they already have.
Right.
but that the overwhelming majority of officers out there, they don't have. You know, that when you're walking down the street in some areas in South Park and Sunnyside, and an officer's going to harass you because you're walking in the middle of the street, you don't have damn sidewalks. Like, you know, what do you mean you're walking in the middle of the street? Like, you know, I mean, you got cars, there's little narrow streets. You gonna walk? You want me to walk in ditches? I mean, and then of course, if you turn around and say that, now you're being disrespectful to the officers. That level of mutual respect, to be perfectly honest with you, I think most officers, the officers that cause problems, they don't start from that place of mutual respect. Okay. I've had officers talk to me differently depending on the clothes that I wear. I didn't change as a person, but if I'm wearing a suit and tie, you know, or I have a clergy collar on, they respond to me differently. Same brother.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's all part of that bias. That's all part of that stuff, man. So, you know, more has to be done, and that training has to be expanded to include more than it includes. So I apologize for my nonverbals. My wife is going to get on me later on.
No, but you know,
That's all right.
I have to agree with you, Pastor, but then at the same time, this conversation that we have for these 2 hours, we're not going to solve those problems. And so I think the good that we're getting out of this conversation is that there are some things that are being recorded and solidified that can at least help us to have a baseline of how to deal. And it's not going to be perfect. We're still going to have the rogue cops, but at least what I'm appreciating Officer Webb and Brown for right now is just giving us some baseline standards of, hey,
What to know, what to do.
Get the name and their badge. They
Yeah.
racist. We're going to get the name and their badge. We're going to talk to their supervisors, and we're going to file these IADs so that we can get the ball rolling. Because as you say, Pastor, I mean, we got to be wise as serpents, harmless as doves, right? So that's pretty much what we got to do. I know you don't. How long? I remember the sermon.
How long, Lord?
I said Jesus said that. I didn't say that. I don't want to take Jesus' credit, you know.
Well, all right. So I got a question, officers, more so along the line of pastors thinking. Integrity of the shield. I know we hear it a lot in football, but that's also a policing thing, right? The integrity of the department, the integrity of the law enforcement system, and all of that. So it seems like there is somewhat of an evolution of that to where we're now starting to see where the individual officer actions are now being looked at as tainting credibility rather than. So basically, this admittance that the police isn't always right. That's what we're kind of trying to get to. And so how can you speak to how your experience as police officers, now because you're HPD, you have a window into what a lot of police departments ought to be doing, thinking, looking at. How do you see this role of the integrity of the shield transitioning from being this perfect unit to the parts being equivalent to making the whole better? I may have stumbled over a couple of them last words, but you know what I mean when I say that. I'm sorry. You get what I'm trying. So the individual officers are also a big part of maintaining the integrity of policing as a whole. That's what I'm trying to say. I got it. Yes.
There you go.
Webb, you want to go first, or you want me to
go ahead?
Okay. Go ahead. So with that, the integrity of the shield, badge, however it is you want to word it. Oh Lord, I'm sorry, my phone's dying.
Uh-oh.
Oh no, charger.
Look, I'm trying to run and get my charger. I'm sorry. Hold on 1 second, please.
Webb, you want to pick
start,
up while she's getting her charger?
Yeah, well, that pretty much comes back on. I'm laughing at Brown. on each officer themselves, you know. In a nutshell, the police department, you know, is what you want to make sure that you're representing at every cause. But it also comes back to yourself personally. You know, the way you were raised morally, and you want to make sure that you do a good job for yourself. But not everybody thinks like that, and everybody is on that same page. But you as a person and as an officer have to make sure that you are doing the right thing from the way that you are raised. Now, for those that go above and beyond and do things outside of that, they have to answer to those questions in those situations. But me, myself, and like Officer Brown and so many others, you know, you have to know that you are doing the right thing and you're doing it for the right reason.
So
Okay, Officer Brown.
I'll kind of piggyback off of that. So unfortunately, we all know that maybe everything that we were taught when we were raised is not the right way, especially with the world evolving and things are becoming different. But that integrity, like I was saying before, the integrity of that badge or of that shield is basically telling you that you're representing our department. Don't embarrass us. So that, and it goes back to the officer as an individual, because I feel this way. My family taught me this. So this is how I'm going to act. So I don't feel like I'm an embarrassment. You see what I'm saying? And so that goes for both sides, you know, that goes for all races, that goes for all different, you know, religions and everything else that we have on a department. It's like, it's kind of hard to put it on an individual officer, because you may not want everybody individual upbringings and integrity in that department. That, so when they say integrity of the badge and of the shield, they mean a department as a whole. They never broke it down. Well, I say they never broke it down to the individual officer, how they were raised, what they feel is morally correct. And that's an issue. So that's something that does need to be revisited, in my opinion, because you have different people from different backgrounds and everything is not right, you know? And we feel like what I do, I feel like if I pray this way, this is the way. It's more than one way to skin a cat. And so it's just that integrity of the badge is for the department more so than the individual.
So attorneys, would you feel that, or do you get a sense that we could get to the place where we could see more legal action taken against police, and that lead to even more changes in police departments across the city, across the nation, to where we can actually have better policing altogether? Because we know it's a slow process, but you know, we got to start somewhere with the law, of course.
Yeah, I think we're at that point where we can start to really move that ball forward a lot faster. As attorneys, obviously, this is something we've been dealing with and seeing, I know since I've started practicing and probably before then, in terms of issues of how we perceive police in the Black community versus how we perceive them in the white community. I know about 10, 12 years ago, I picked a jury. And while we were picking the jury, there was a question that came up about, do police officers ever lie? Or would you ever believe that a police officer would do something that was improper? And every white male over the age of 50 in that jury pool said that a police officer would never lie. And so we know in the Black community that that's total opposite in terms of how we perceive policing. And so from that perspective, I think what we've seen just in the past month, and again, it's been moving towards it slowly, it took really the protest to bring people to see and understand just the concept, you know, whatever you think of Black Lives Matter, just the concept of the Black life mattering when we talk about it from the standpoint of criminal justice, of the prison system, and just the social justice system in general. So the context of that is that we want those in policing who have the ability to take a life or to change a person's life in terms of how they police them, that understanding that how we see policing, there is a divide. And I think one of the I guess providential things that happened was that the majority of those who were out there protesting were white kids. So from that perspective, it really had made them have to open their eyes to the fact that this is a problem. And so from that standpoint, when we talk about protecting the shield, and I know, you know, we look at Officer Webb and Officer Brown, and you know, there's a level of respect, and I even see it in terms of the comments, how people are saying, well, the black officers see it this way, but white officers are not doing it like this. And not all black officers are doing it like this. And I can say for myself that I've been in that position before where I've been stopped by a police officer and they just go in and be disrespectful about me speeding. I had to tell them, look, if you're gonna write me a ticket, but you're not gonna talk to me like I'm your kid. And so the officer, I think, understood at that point, went to his car, he came back and apologized. But in the context of that, I think it was Pastor Cofield mentioned it, not all of us get that same type of treatment. And so that goes back to a psychological understanding of how you have to treat people. And more importantly, we have to drill down on in terms of how we deal with Black lives and Black people in terms of policing. So with this question about the shield, and I know I'm not a moderator, but I just had a question myself in terms of how the police, what do they think about this issue of defunding? Personally, I think the term may not be the best term to use, but I think it brings about a thought process in terms of how do we better protect and serve, period, in the context of we see their problems, we see their racial issues, implicit bias, covert racism, which allows officers to be complicit and compliant when they know. I mean, that's what we saw on the video with George Floyd, just total complicit to this officer's lack of respect for Black life and really just being a racist, and nobody did anything about it, even though you had people out there saying, just let the man up and breathe. So I think in the context, when we move towards, I would say, restructuring of policing and protecting and serving, would like to also know what police officers think about that. I mean, because I think that's an important part of the evolution that we have to have in terms of how we police and in terms of how we use that concept to protect and serve.
I'll let you answer it.
Webb, me? Webb, you want me to go?
You're muted.
Webb, you're muted.
Oh.
I'm back now.
Talk ahead.
Now, I don't know a whole lot about the defunding deal, but from what I have heard about it, you know, I can understand what they're saying, but from what I've heard, a lot of people say they think defunding means get rid of the police department in general, which that can't happen and that shouldn't happen. But redirecting some of the money to go to some of the departments and getting officers better training and more training in certain situations, yes, I'm down for that. But that's political. That's, you know, above my pay grade, but I'm down for it. So when I do hear it and I hear those situations like that, I would say, yeah, let's do that, but not to the sense to where we don't need police. Let's get rid of the whole police in general, and we're going to police ourselves, because that ain't happening.
No.
My understanding of the defunding of the police department is taking some of the funds that are going to police, because if anything's going on, domestic issue, a break-in, a fire, I mean, whatever issue you have, everybody calls the cops. So the defunding of the police would be to take some of those monies away from the police department and allocate it to specific groups that would deal with domestic issues, deal with, you know, whatever the issues are that we have, that y'all carry everything. But I think your burden would be less if you allocated funds to a different department that could handle some of the burden that you all take on. So that's my understanding of the defunding of the police. Not that y'all aren't needed, because y'all are needed, but just to lighten your load and allocate it to some people who could better handle certain situations.
Right.
And,
Yeah,
and
the term
we
should
down
be.
for that.
Yeah,
We
that term
down
should,
for that. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say the term probably should be restructuring.
Yeah,
Yes.
defunding is
Defunding,
not
I
a
think,
good.
I think gives it well, what it's done is giving conservatives the opportunity to bastardize the word
Absolutely.
and take it to an extreme that's not there. But I would say restructuring.
Absolutely. So to move the conversation on now, police have I believe that one of the things that police have been called on by the citizens that they serve is to get rid of, right? It's a get rid of this problem. So there's a criminal at my door, get rid of him. There is a domestic issue going on, get rid of the bad person. And so police are always, as y'all said, assuming the worst. And so this get rid of mindset has been so ingrained in our society to the point where when someone calls the police, there is the police are coming with a mindset ready to get rid of. So there was a situation that I saw a few years ago in Minnesota Mall where a man sat across from a store and the store clerk called the police because they said there was a suspicious looking black man sitting across from the store. We understand that in the George Floyd situation, the police were called on alert. And we see this so many times. Amy Cooper, that just happened, where the police are being weaponized against minorities. What steps can at least the city of Houston Police Department take in the training to make sure that officers, even with whatever the initiating call is, still execute without the preconceived notion that things are going to happen, understanding that weaponizing the police is a thing and that Black lives are in danger when they're being weaponized?
Honestly, that all goes back to training again. And fortunately, we do have a minority chief, and he understands, the issues that's going on. Some like him, some don't. Some is no in between with him. And I think that it's really important for those citizens who are calling in those false reports, because that's a charge, and I think they need to be held accountable for that. You can't just call in the police to handle your situation because you don't like the way something is going. Like, that's not how that works. Because now it takes so much from us and our resources and what we have going on to deal with these minor situations. But the way the citizen called it in, it's elevated. And so now we're like, okay, we have to respond a certain way because we respond by codes. And so it's one of those things that if I get this call as a code 2 versus it being a code 4, what it probably really is, I'm running hot to this situation, and then it's not even anything going on. I find that to be a problem. I find that to be an issue. And I feel like these people that's calling in these false reports, they need to be held accountable and charged.
But in situations where you get the code 2 instead of the code 4, is there time for assessment of the situation? Because we're seeing too many times where Black people are dying in these false code 2s. What the police has to do something about that, because when legally the state or the city tells the family of this deceased person that it's not the officer's fault, whose fault is it? They were killed. Who has to take responsibility for that in this situation? And the lawyers can jump in if they want to as well.
Absolutely. Like I say, the training is what I was referring to. The training. You have to slow down. You have to assess the situation. You have to see it for what it really is instead of just running into it and, making a split-second decision every time. Every call is not a split-second decision. Now, granted, we do have those situations that we have to make that split-second decision, but every call is not that. So it goes back to, like I said, the training and slowing down, actually assessing the situation that you're facing and know how to deal with it, formulate a plan. Because I was a trainer. I trained the cadets that came out of the academy to the stations, and that's how I taught them. Okay, yes, we're going, even if we are going to a code 1 and code 2, those are the highest priority. You still need, on your way to that call, you need to be formulating in your head, okay, if it's this, I can handle it this way, but it may be this, so I can handle it this way on your way there. So that way, when you get there, you don't have to just jump in and be like, oh, okay, now I got, because you already thought it out in your head. It may not be as serious, and it may be as serious. So you want to make sure that you go into the situation kind of ready and with some kind of knowledge. Okay, well, yeah, I got to go in hot. Okay, no, okay, I can slow it down because I see kind of what's going on, and I can approach this a little different.
But Karens are on the rise.
Karens are on the rise.
And so now how can HPD influence the white officer who hears of a white woman calling about a black man problem, like an Amy Cooper? And what can we depend on in, I mean, it's the training. That's kind of like me saying I went to college. So it's because I went to college. It's because I went to college. That's theory. That's all
right.
theory.
But that's different. It's a different situation. That training is different because when you go to college, you take that class one time and you're done. This is reoccurring training for us. This is something that we train on every quarter. We have quarters that we take our training. It's quarterly training. So they're consistently putting this in our head. Okay, train. So that way we don't have these situations. We don't have these issues. And, it's a lot of times it's easy to say, dealing with these white officers, but it's not always the white officers. Unfortunately, it's some of our own people will treat you worse than the white officer will. Yeah. My best trainer that trained me was a white officer. He's retired now, but the whole 3rd Ward knows him, loves him, and will call on his name at any time. You can go talk to anybody within the 3rd Ward area because he treated people as they were. They were people. You see what I'm saying? And so that training that you get in college, because I went to college too, but that training that I get in college, I take that, whatever. And yeah, that we always revert back to our training if you got good training. So it's all in what you took from it. So we have reoccurring training. We go to these same classes. We have to have these same classes in order to keep that C-code license. We have to have those same classes to make sure we get it. It's not like, oh, we took it that one time and it's a possibility that we forgot some of it. No. Okay, well, come on back and get it again.
So what is the consequence for police officers missing training? And then Attorney Sparks.
I'm dying.
Go ahead, Sparks.
I'm dying because we've been training since the inception of HPD and all these police, all of these different police departments, and they haven't stopped anybody from dying, right? So training is not it. I get T-codes on every officer. You can go sit in a class, but if you have hatred in your heart, that's not going to stop you from doing what you do on the street. So what I think, the biggest thing that I think that has come out of this, the death of George Floyd is the accountability that these officers are going to be held to now. I think that you can fuss at your kids all day long, but sometimes you got to pop them. And it's us seeing these officers being charged with murder, manslaughter, knowing even the DAs, if you're lying or if you're hiding evidence, you will be charged. I think for them to see that you have the penalty or the consequence of being charged criminally is going to change those actions. The training that they've been doing for the last 50 years is not going to do it. I don't think you can train somebody how not to be racist. I think the fear of consequence can make them act different when they go out.
I agree with that 100%. But you still need the training. So you rather officers go out there with no training.
No, we didn't say that.
No. I'm just saying you rather the officers go out there with no training and because but they racist, so they gonna act how they want to act anyway. So don't worry about training them because they racist and they're gonna act. Yes, absolutely, that accountability. And like I say, HPD has the highest And to me, because I only work for HPD, so I can't speak for anybody else, but HPD has the highest to hold you accountable for every action that you take when you're on their clock, because no one wants that liability. No one wants that liability. The city don't want to pay out those settlements and have those lawsuits on them, on their name or whatever. So that's why they take it to, so if they train you, then they can use that to say, okay, well, I'm holding you accountable because you trained on this day, you signed up, time stamped and everything else, because they're gonna pull out all your records from the academy all the way up until that moment. They're gonna pull up everything. We did this, we did that to limit their liability and to hold that officer accountable.
Come on,
Well, I don't want any problems, but what I'm gonna tell you is there are eight unsolved police murders of citizens. They got training. The 8. Let's just stop with the 8. Let's just stop there. I think I think that ends that part of the conversation. They all got training, but they still killed Black or minority people, and those still are no charges, no nothing. So
exactly. I mean, and that's, unfortunately, that's going to happen. That number, that 8, is going to rise, unfortunately, because not everyone feels the way we feel that people should be treated like people. And until we can get to that, which will never happen, because it takes all type of people to make the world go round. And so, unfortunately, we'll probably never reach that point, unfortunately.
So I guess the point of all of this is just to forget pride and just make it home at the end of a traffic stop with the law enforcement. And
honestly, the traffic stops aren't even the biggest problem. It's those domestic situations where, that's probably a bigger issue than the traffic stops. Traffic stops are a big issue, but I will put it second to domestic issues. But I just feel like it's gonna be it's a hard battle to fight, because you're dealing with people, and we all have our own mindset. We all have our own, upbringing. We all have our own issues that we deal with, and that's on both sides, law enforcement and citizens. And until law enforcement understand that we are those citizens as well, then we can get somewhere. Then we can cover some ground, because I'm only in my uniform 8 to 16 hours a day. After that, I'm just this.
Any one of y'all taking over for Chief Acevedo? Just playing. Pastor, in 2 minutes, tell us what you're thinking. Tell us what you're thinking.
I think, with all due respect to the good officers, I think this whole system, similar to what was done in Camden, New Jersey, this whole system has to be debunked. The whole system, the racist roots of policing in this country has to be dismantled, has to be identified and dismantled. And I'm talking about going back to the patty rollers. I'm talking about going back to the Law and Order Society. That was the foundation of these policing agencies that had as their goal to keep slaves in check, to capture freed slaves, and to return Black men to fields. That's how far back this mentality goes. And I want to say again, I've said it a lot recently, we have to understand we haven't come that far. I shook the hands of my grandfather, who loved me dearly. He was born in 1898, which means he shook the hands and knew very intimately people who were freed as slaves. So my handshake is just one generation away, which means if you shaking my hands or interacted with me, you're just 2 generations away from my family. My great grandfather was the product of slave rape. So we haven't come that far. And so while a lot of progress has been made, the truth of the matter is this system is not broke. It is functioning as it was intended. And to Officer Brown's point, whiteness the disease of whiteness is beyond race. And if you don't get it, think about it. Whiteness is beyond race.
Got it.
Right? That mentality is something that has to be dealt with and has to be addressed. And what I hope we will do is change the whole premise of policing. Whether we call it quotas or requirements, that we change the whole premise of policing and what it means to keep the public safe, and to recognize that as a Black man, I have as many rights as a white man does, that I live in Third Ward. I have as many rights as a person who lives in River Oaks, and that those rights are respected and those rights are honored, and me as a human being, that I'm respected.
We're at the 11:55 mark right now. I'd like to ask those in charge, do we have time to go through the questions in the chat box? A lot of them were answered by the attorneys already, but I wanted to ask if we can take a little bit more time and address some of the questions in the chat.
Yeah, I don't have any objections to continuing on. And, you know, I guess people will govern themselves accordingly who are on the call.
Okay. In the interest of time, if we could have some of these questions answered expeditiously, I'd appreciate that. Again, a lot of these were already answered, but there was one from Sandra Lee, if I can find it. More people need to join the parents trying to get special licenses for people who have special needs, so the police know that they are special needs people and need to be treated as such. There is a need to have a law that immediately removes officers who are unable to deal with special needs people. Do you, as officers of the law, agree with this?
Well, I would say if parents know they have children that are special needs, and they might be in a situation where the law enforcement might be called out, to have some kind of procedure that they can take or have, so the officer would know. No, we as a department with HPD, we go through that, like I said, that part of the training, and we have knowledge of what to do in those situations, but not every department is like that. So if that family or that family member knows that their child or even their brother or sister, anyone can be in that situation, just to take the necessary steps to notify an officer, to have something there in case an incident would occur, would help us out a lot. Because, I mean, we don't know what we're dealing with. You know, we don't know if someone is having an epileptic attack, you know, or are they drunk, or are they high? But to see it and to go through the steps from what we have knowledge of, and to have something there, like, you know, an armband or something in the car or something on that person to let them know that this is what kind of situation that they might be involved in, would help us out in a whole nutshell.
So one of my mentors, she has an autistic son. She has an autistic son, and she went to the police station in her jurisdiction, and she gave them pictures and documentation of her special needs son, because he's now driving. Is that something that HPD has in terms of allowing citizens of special need children to alert officers formally, so that it can be in the system? So when they pull up Jonathan Joseph, not the football player, but he's not special needs, or he's special needs.
I honestly don't know. I believe so, but I'm honestly not 100% sure. But I'm glad that you brought that up, because it helps us to educate ourselves as well. So I will be looking into that. I'm sure it is, but I'm not 100% sure. So I don't want to give you any false information, but I will be looking into it, because I would like to share that with my residents on my next door. So I will be looking into it to see. But I mean, I know that there's a way that you can put it on their driver's license too, if there's any, you know, but we have to even get to that point to get to their driver's license. And as you know, if you're not really paying attention to what's going on, you can think that it's one situation when it's something completely different, like when we're dealing with our nonverbal community. So that's a good point.
Okay, in that same vein, we have another question from Monica. Her son is autistic and nonverbal and makes sudden movements and noises, which are all the things that y'all said we should not do. What if this happens with her when he's with her, or if he's with another person and the officer is not wanting to hear what's going on with her son? And what are the things that she can do to make sure that she gets home?
Just communicate.
Go ahead, Brown.
I'm sorry. Oh, just communicate it to that officer. Look, this is what's going on. We can't discount medical issues. We can't even ask you even further into it unless you want to, whatever information you want to give us. And I'm not going to ask you any further into it other than, do you need any medical assistance? Other than that, okay, I understand. This is, what it is. And as y'all say, not all officers are going to understand that, but we hope to get it to that point to where officers do understand it, to where we can actually recognize it on site that this is happening, because we do have a community of nonverbal or those who are autistic. Because our commander, she talks about it all the time, so I'm sure she wouldn't have a problem with me speaking on it. But our commander has an autistic child. And so these are things that he deals with. So these are conversations that we're starting to have, because she's the commander over our whole station. So of course, she wants us to be aware and know how to deal with those situations. So it's good to have, people in higher position that can address those situations, because it may be something that we never even really thought about before, other than the training that we get at the academy. And then once we leave, it's like, I haven't dealt with that on the street before. So, I don't even really think about it too much anymore. You see what I'm saying? So It's so good to have, people in those positions that can bring it back to, okay, we need to work on this a lot more with this particular community.
Okay. The next question was from my sister. There were several programs mentioned regarding the youth. Are there any police programs that help to bridge the gap with the adult community? I guess the PIP that you were talking about would be one example, but is there anything else?
We have PIP, and then we have the Citizens Police Academy. So you can go through the Citizens Police Academy. You're going to do everything that we do to go through the academy, just as the cadets do. You're going to do driver's training, shooting at the range. You're going to do DWIs, every training that we go through, you go through it as well. And it's our Citizens Police Academy. And that's one thing that more of our people, I feel, need to attend, because then you see, those interactions. You see, how we deal with certain things, how we respond to certain things. You kind of see it in a different light, and you see it from both sides. So I think those things are really, really important, but unfortunately, not many of our people go to those things. And I think it's so important for us.
Honestly, I've never heard of none of the things you mentioned. So yeah,
so we need to do a better job as getting those programs and things out to know, because unfortunately, so the way that we get it out is to our specific community. So every station has a Nextdoor. Do y'all know about Nextdoor?
Yeah.
Okay, so on Nextdoor, whoever your officer is in your community is supposed to tell you about these things. I post it all the time, and I let them know this is when this is happening. And I posted several times, a reminder, PIP meeting coming up, and, post a flyer and everything else to kind of grab their attention, to let them know we have these things that's offered to our communities. And please, please, please take advantage of them, because it's really good programs, and I just really wish that more of us would take advantage of them.
Thank you for that, Officer Brown. Layla asked, why do we have so many different departments? I'm assuming that's you're asking about different police departments, Layla. We'll assume that's the path she's asking.
Yeah, I was more referring to, like, we have constables, we have the sheriff's department, we have HPD. I was just wondering, even in the city of Houston, I know there are sub-cities or suburban cities outside of Houston, but even within Houston, you still have the Metro Police. It was some of those departments that you guys were talking about earlier, and I was like, why is there so much policing or different departments there?
So we all cover different grounds. So with the city of Houston, we are in Harris County, but the sheriff's department, they handle Harris County as a whole. The city of Houston, we handle those areas within Harris County and also some of the outskirts areas. So we also handle some stuff in Montgomery County, Fort Bend County, Galveston County. So we have a wide spread that we handle, but we may handle different things. So let's go to the constables. The constables handle more things that's civil. So maybe like those evictions. And it just basically lightens that load, as we were talking about earlier with the defunding, reconstructing, as we're gonna call it. The constables, it lightens the load. So we may not have to go to, a civil dispute that's going on, something that they can handle in civil court versus something that's criminal. The constables can say, okay, we'll take over that. So the constables, they also patrol our housing projects. So like CUNY Homes and, so they have contracts with those housing projects, and they deal with the issues that's within there. We also have CUNY Homes in our area. So yes, we still go to different issues, but if they have something that's civil, we'll say, can you call the constables out? So that way I can take some of these other 15 calls that's holding on the board, so these people not waiting. Metro, they handle strictly Metro issues, things that's going on the Metro bus. Unfortunately, people are getting robbed on Metro buses. So they have their own issues that they have to deal with. It's just a big city, and it's actually, unfortunately, really needed, because unfortunately, HPD, we don't have enough officers. We really, really don't. And so we really need those other agencies to, to work with us, and we all work together to make it, a lot easier. And then it takes off a lot of stress from the officers, so that we are a lot less stressed when we're dealing with our citizens, so we have better interaction.
Okay, thank you for that. The next question we had was from Mai. So on what planet will a bad cop allow you to record and oblige with calling his or her supervisor prior to escalation? We need to know how to deal with these types of officers. That immediately brought up we were talking about citizens recording. And maybe I don't have my phone right here, but maybe I have my video on or the recording on and face down in my car, just so I have some recording of what's going on, with a situation where the officer is not Officer Brown or Officer Webb. But if you have any other if you have any other feedback for that question.
Well, basically, like we said earlier, when you ask for a supervisor, one has to come out there with us. I don't know about the other departments, so that won't happen. Bad cop, good cop, quiet cop, lame cop, it don't matter with us. When you have to, and when you request one will come out there. So I can't speak for the other departments, but for us, that won't happen, because by our general orders, a supervisor has to come out there.
Okay. And if they happen to not, you have that recording and you can file the internal
affairs complaint.
Internal affairs, yes.
Exactly, yes. If you feel as though you were treated unjustly, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Mai also asked, who teaches officer de-escalation? That's the key.
So we have certain trained, and the trained officers that teach those de-escalations, they actually have other training outside of T-code training that they have to deal with as well, that they have to go through, and they bring back, those things to us. It's also, I think it's a citizens group that they meet with as well, to see what they, what's their concerns and things that, we can do better as a department, and how to handle certain things. And they have different people on that group that they utilize they put all of that together, and then they make a training, and then they bring it to us, to the academy. We all have to go to that training quarterly.
There's a comment from Ronald Bell. Let's do this again. Include Sheriff, Fort Bend, Harris County, HPD, Stafford, Sugar Land, Mo City, so on and so forth. Love that comment. Can't make that decision myself, but I'd be happy to participate again. Let's see, I'm going through the questions here.
Can the licenses be taken? Can you take driver's license?
Huh?
If someone has a medical condition, and or
that's
of course,
not
if anyone,
No, that's not right. I meant for police
The
officers.
T-code license?
Oh,
I think she meant the T-code license. Yes, you
Well,
can lose
if
your
you don't-
T-code license.
if you don't take the required amount of training per year, then yes, you are in violation, and your license will be taken.
And
Can
you
it
are no
be
longer a
taken
police
for,
officer within the state of Texas.
Okay, but can it be taken for, like, if you continuously keep doing things like the people with 1820 complaints? Can I have a civil suit saying, like, you're acting against my civil liberties? Can your license be taken?
Well, no, they just fire you.
Yeah, they fire you, so then it really doesn't take your license though. So let's just be on the up and up with it. They really don't take your license because it's so many people that may have gotten fired with HPD and go get hired on with the constables.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, those things aren't looked at. But then you may say, oh, this officer had 18 complaints, but now you have to realize, okay, let me figure out what kind of complaints they are. Because I got complaints. I got complaints. They may have been small, minute, like I say, something as simple as, posting on social media. I took my lick and I went on. But at the same token, I'm not out here violating anybody's civil rights.
Right.
So it's just one of those things that I wish I could tell you, yes, they will take their license, but no. To be honest with you, no.
So
at some point they will, they will lose it because we are creature of habits, and they will continue their behavior and they'll eventually get fired from there. And then yes, they can take their license.
I'd like to suggest, maybe in light of that statement, there's been a lot of talk around removing qualified immunity for officers, but I think this issue we saw happen with the murder of Elijah McClain, where one of the young ladies resigned before she was fired. And so now under that resignation, she can apply and will be able to get another job in law enforcement. And I think it might be something legislatively to look at, just for this group to make a note of, to be able to solicit our legislature around passing a law that for a certain offense, not unlike a nurse or a doctor who can lose their license, that there's certain things as an officer you should lose your license for, period. It's just no question. Something minor, maybe you shouldn't lose your license. But when it comes to the violation of somebody's civil rights, and that can be defined just as a suggestion for something moving forward.
Absolutely. Agreed.
Okay, Sharon Barnes asked if there's some place on the police website posting of like how to get to a safe, well-lit area if you're stopped. And Tashara, no.
That's me.
Lala answered below that she'll be sending out Know Your Rights information cards by Monday. So if you want to receive some of this information, put your email address down below, and that information that you're asking about, Sharon, will be shared with you. Sadari asks, is there racial sensitivity training? And then when training, we know that training will not be followed by everyone. Why can't we have a public data bank for officers that has complaints or charges against officers public, where like if they went to apply it in another police station, that information will come up?
It's public information. All of our records are public information. Anyone can get their hands on it. 1200 Travis, they can give you anything that you want to know, anything that you need. It was another question before that I was going to answer.
Racial sensitivity training?
Yes, we do have racial sensitivity training. We have cultural diversity that we have to take. So yes, we do have that as well. And I think they're adding more to that whenever we're able to get back into the academy and get those trainings. But I believe there are more classes that are being added to our list of FICO classes.
Okay. There are some amazing questions in here. I hope that we are afforded an opportunity to meet again. I'm sorry that we will not be able to get to all of them today. Maybe we can print these out and address them in some type of email correspondence. I don't know. But I don't know if I'm supposed to take over and close this out. Oh,
No,
Camila has an announcement to make. So Camila.
Hi, so I just wanted to make sure everyone saw the information in the chat. I dropped it in concerning if you would like to be a part of a panel that gathers information. We want to disseminate information through social media about Know Your Rights. Of course, it'll be information from today, and there will be other features that we're going to work on, but we're looking to get a focus group together. And so if you like to be part of the focus group, we ask that you email myself and LaToinese. So I dropped my email address and LaToinese address in the chat box. I'll drop it in again, so it'll be a most recent post for everyone. Just email us and let us know if you want to be part of the focus group. We'll be working on this for the next few months, and the goal is to have something produced by the end of the year. I also have another announcement regarding Black Restaurant Week. So here in Houston, we have Black Restaurant Week kicking off. I think it kicked off yesterday, actually on the 10th. I also dropped that website into the chat box. I'll drop it in there again. But one thing that I did note is that there are other cities that are doing the same thing. So please go and support the Black businesses, the Black restaurants. If you are in the city of Houston and you're participating in this, we ask that you would tag the Good Hope Church with either, a picture of what restaurant you're checking out, a picture of the food or your receipt, anything so that you can let us know how you support it. And now I want to pass it over to Minister Johnson.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I just want to thank all of our panelists and our participants for getting on the call. I want to thank them just for taking out time out of their day. Brother Webb, Attorney Cohen, Attorney Sparks Payne, our moderators, Jackie and Roger Chambers, and also Officer Brown. And so I just want to thank you all so much. And I also want to thank our participants because at the core of what we're doing is really a first step toward a larger systemic and structural issue. I was speaking with somebody on yesterday, and I was telling them about this event. And this is a brother that I grew up with, and I'm a native of 3rd Ward. I'm born and raised in 3rd Ward. And I was talking with him, and I was telling him about the event. And I told the brother that we were doing Know Your Rights. And so he asked me, how do I know my rights? And what he meant by that is, if you've lived in 3rd Ward, if you've lived in South Park, as Officer Webb has, if you've lived in 5th Ward or Setter Gas or Greens Point, for the last 30 years, these areas have been designated as open drug zones. And so the name of George Floyd has been invoked in this conversation multiple times. George Floyd was a personal friend of mine, and I've known him for over 25 years. But long before he lost his life to Officer Chauvin, he was the victim of just being in an open drug zone and having his rights violated. And so long before there was Officer Chauvin, there was Salky Gray, there was Stringfellow, now there's Officer Goins, and now we're at Chauvin. And so to Roger's point earlier, this basic conversation, establishing baselines in terms of what your rights are needed. We went through the trouble of recording this because long after this live Zoom is over, I'm going to be directing brothers in these communities to go watch this Zoom because I want them to know that they do have rights. And regardless of if they're in 77004, 702621, they have the same rights as somebody in River Oaks or West University or Champions Forest. You know, oftentimes these brothers are victims, again, of a designation of their community because these communities have been designated open drug zones. And so a lot of times enforcement comes under the guise of drug laws and drug laws that have been inflicted on our community. And so I want to really thank everybody who's involved. I especially want to thank Officer Webb and Officer Brown again. I know we took on a lot of questions that were outside of the initial Know Your Rights, but out of this, we believe that there's going to be an awareness piece. We're asking you all to join us in this initiative. You know, this is not a 100-yard sprint, it's a marathon. We are organizing around these issues of system and structural racism. One of the things that you heard, in addition to the structural and the systemic racism, especially when it comes to law enforcement, is internalized racism. And so we cannot be fooled into thinking that our only adversaries when it comes to our rights are only Caucasian officers. I'm a product of the criminal justice system here in this city. My first case was given to me unjustly by an African-American officer. And so, you know, we have to understand that this is an issue that is ingrained and embedded in a structure and a system, and it comes in all shapes, forms, sizes, colors, and et cetera. And so I really hope that this was informative to everyone. We're looking forward to engaging you. I want to thank especially our pastor, Dr. DZ Cofield, who is continuing the fight. And I want to leave you all with this: be the change that you seek. And so you all will be getting more information from us within the days and weeks to come. Thank you to LaToinese and Camila and Renee, really the driving force behind these initiatives. These sisters are committed to the fight for human rights and equality through a Christian and a biblical lens. And so I want to thank everyone as well. God bless.
Thank you again to the panelists, and this will conclude our meeting.
Don't forget to wear your mask.
Thank everybody.
Don't forget to wear your mask.
Wear your mask, baby. Wear your mask.
Yes.
Don't forget to vote, guys. Don't forget to vote.
Oh, yes.
Will do.
Okay, I'm going to ask Camila, Renee, Jackie, and Roger, Charles, and our panelists to stay on while everybody else logs off. Thank you.
Awesome meeting.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much for joining.
Okay, thanks to all the participants and the minister.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Reverend Bell, we see you.
You're trying to stay on.
Is there a way to exit people out?
Yeah.
Go through security. Give them a minute. I'm gonna go really fast.
Hey, y'all. Y'all get some lunch.
I think we have just about everybody out.
Reverend Bell stayed on.
Reverend Bell ain't going nowhere.
There's someone on the phone. Is that?
I'm not sure who that is. Do y'all know who that is?
So Pastor, any comments that you want to give in regards to the meeting? I just wanted to thank the panelists again. I want to thank you all, those who are still on.